However, insofar as most careers within professional writing, quotes, imply a particular sort of task, that is, as work, as a place one is confined to for a certain period of time each day, I hope my presentation offers something different. First, I start with the standard notion of professional writing that I found. I'm going to compare sort of my ideas with this. In my other project, professional writing was analyzed as a potential career choice. I call this sort of thing careerism in my paper, my interview report. For example, I listed this quote that was found. I kept it anonymous because I'm going to be heavily criticizing this sort of judgment. I've discovered that much of what we learned in class directly corresponds to the professional writers in the workforce. It's pretty clear from that quote that this class is seen as sort of a stepping stone into an eventual career, someplace that we're going to go, sort of a predestined sort of path. And I'm going to argue that professional writing might become far more than simply one career choice among others. The question for me is, must professional writing be confined to the capitalist workplace? Or instead, might the theories found within professional writing take us to new and unexpected places? So with that, I'll jump in. And this is sort of an alternative. I look at the theories behind professional writing rather than professional writing itself. I kind of look at professional writing as a loaded term with the professional right in there. It implies a career, but I would say that, again, these theories behind it, especially those associated with rhetoric and postmodernism, attack the foundations of Western thought and provide us with some new places to go. I list some useful concepts that are found in the course of my study in my 2 professional writing classes this semester. One is something I call the anarchy of the subject. With this, you might think of Nathaniel's concept of intersubjectivity. This basically refers to the concept that there's no unchanging subjective essence, no enlightenment sense of the subject. Instead, the subject is created by social forces. My next concept is an attack on objective truth. Once we do away with the notions of objective truth and realize that, like the subject, truth is socially defined, rhetoric becomes vitally important. The end of objective truth means these truths can no longer stand on their own, and so the art of persuasion, rhetoric as such, is completely necessary. And finally, an attack on rigid binaries. The example I'm going to use is truth and fiction. And to illustrate this, I'm going to bring in my friend Michel Foucault. This is a quote from him that I rather like. I'm well aware that I've never written anything but fictions. I do not mean to say, however, that truth is therefore absent. It seems to me that the possibility exists for fiction to function in truth, for a fictional discourse to induce effects of truth, and for bringing it about that a true discourse engenders or manufactures something that does not as yet exist. A couple things about this quote. Well, first, briefly, Michel Foucault is a post-structuralist, postmodernist philosopher who died in 1984. A couple things about the quote. Basically, I'm attacking sort of the rigid binary separation between truth and fiction, and instead offering the suggestion that truth and fiction, while still different, aren't rigidly opposed to one another. The common thread on all of these criticisms is that they attack the Enlightenment view of the human and the world. And I would suggest that as we shed these epistemological ideas, so too might we shed the structures that are based upon them. Getting back to professional writing, I might define professional writing as writing which utilizes rhetoric to produce particular effects. This is a deliberately incredibly broad definition of professional writing. And really, you might notice I kind of hack off the professional there. That's my next point. What of the word professional? It is professional in the modern capitalist sense, in the sense of signifying a career field. However, as I'm going to explain in a moment with a historical example, it might become revolutionary, it might become radically othered. And I am, of course, much more interested in this becoming than I am in the current definition of professional writing. That's why I began the presentation sort of trying to do away with what I would call the standard notion of professional writing. And I think a definition, after all, as we sort of discussed in this class, is only an argument. And so I'm about to argue differently when it comes to professional writing. This is my historical example of how professional writing might become something differently. Some of you might be familiar with the events of May 1968 in Paris, France. In this student and worker-led uprising, the form and process of writing was revolutionized along with society at large. And by that, I'm generally referring to the immense role that graffiti and radical posters played in that uprising. They filled the streets of Paris. This right here is an example of one of them. It means no to the bureaucracy, because the protests were largely centered around attacking what was viewed as a rigid and homogenizing bureaucracy at the university level. That was sort of the cause of the student strikes. I bring in another quote here by Jean Baudrillard. He says that even signs must burn, and so by that I think he means that even things we take for granted, like forms of writing, forms of discourse, have to be revolutionary, altered, I believe. And I think that's really the task of any sort of academic endeavor. And I think it's something that professional writing could become, rather than being complicit with the powers that be. It could become radically other, as I suggested before. And so this brings us finally to some comments on the future of professional writing. The opportunity exists, I believe, for professional writing to transform into a discipline which works against the prevailing societal codes rather than for them. As Nathaniel sort of humorously suggested a few days ago, maybe it was last Thursday, he said that professional writing is sort of the area in the English department which is the most complicit or rebellious in that it is so complicit with the codes that be and things like that, simply by virtue of it being so-called professional writing. But I hope that, though this is a brief presentation, I've illustrated that with the theories behind it, and especially if you're in Mark Santos's class, you've maybe been hearing about these more, that the theories behind professional writing can serve as radical critiques to the prevailing order, just as they serve as radical critiques to the prevailing epistemological codes of the Enlightenment. I finished my presentation here with a quote from Marx. But first I have to ask, will it be complicity or resistance with professional writing? And I think that's for us to decide. But I think the words of Marx might be pointing us in what I would argue is the right direction. He says that it is all the more clear that what we have to accomplish at present, I am referring to a ruthless criticism of all that exists. Ruthless both in the sense of not being afraid of the results it arrives at, and in the sense of being just as little afraid of conflict with the powers that be. And I really think that that's the direction that we need to go, and the direction of the theories behind the professional writing tables. That's it.